Welcome to episode number 18 from Coaching in the Car. Always brought to you by CoachingProcessWins.com. Tell you what I'm doing today. I'm in, I don't know if it's east, west, south, or north. I'm maybe central. I'm in central Texas. That's what we'll call it because it's near Austin. A little town called Wimberley, Texas. And real near there is Buda, Texas. And I tell you what, if you don't think football's big in Texas, I've never heard of Wimberley and I've never heard of Buda. But I drove by both of their high school football stadiums today. And there's not many stadiums in the entire state of Tennessee as big as these two small little towns, single football stadiums. They're beautiful. That's not a knock against my great home state of Tennessee. I'm just saying these two stadiums here in Buda and Wimberley, Texas, which it's the backwoods here. I don't have any cell reception for most of the day. I got to drive somewhere else to get it. So that tells you a little bit about Texas football. Well, let's get on with episode number 18. And I tell you what, I've got sort of a little rant, if you will. And if you'll stay with me, you're going to see it's usually a rant has something to do with negativity. This is not negative. It's just it's an observation that if you'll stay with me, you'll see there's a lot of positive to it. And as I go into it, I'm going to be mentioning the word grind. That reminds me, before we get into my take on the grind, I hadn't talked about my guys at Grinds lately. Kick the can. I'm not going to go on to the practice field, game field without it. Grinds, getgrinds.com. GetGrinds.com is a coffee grind mixture that you can put between your cheek and gum, and I'm telling you, it's the stuff. So GetGrinds.com always gets you 15% discount if you type in Coach's Choice 15. That's 15. So let's get on with what I'm thinking about. You got to grind. You got to keep grinding. Grind. It seems like I keep getting screamed at in terms of football work, player workouts, preparation, and it's all equated to the word got to keep grinding. Got to grind. Now, I know what that means, and you know what that means. But one of the big things that I always talk about is being careful with your words. What do you say, and how do you say it? Because words matter. When I think of grind, I think of being in a coal mine. Now, I've never been in a coal mine, but I imagine that an old West Virginia coal miner going down in that mine shaft and having to mine that coal and fighting that black lung disease. We're talking about working for a living now. And there's many, many modern day, heck, there's still coal mining, but many, many jobs here in 2017 where a man or a woman have got to get up. They got to get out before daybreak. They don't get home without their back being broke near in half. That's a grind. But I keep getting yelled at on social media about the grind. You got to keep grinding. And I just think about that. And what I equate it with is drudgery. I equate it with dread. I equate it with misery. When when I get into what I love, and I've talked about this in a previous episode about focus. When you focus, you get into this thing called flow. And without me getting into a long dissertation about flow, it's a state of almost euphoric release. Great musical composers, poets, great thinkers, great inventors get into this non-distracted, close out all the outside influences, turn off the phone, and do your thing and create. And that's called flow. People that get into that creative state describe it almost as euphoric, giving them a sort of a high, and just, it's almost like a runner that is really in shape, and they're out running, and they get to that point where they get to that runner's high. And again, it's that euphoric feeling that some people describe and have described it forever as a second wind. It's just, man, I ought to be dog tired, and I've got this burst. And you just feel like you're going on air, and you're almost on autopilot. That's a second wind. That's euphoric. That's a flow. When I think of grind, the best word I think of is dread. I'm dreading this. I don't like this. I've got to use willpower, which, by the way, is one of the most overrated things. And we can spend another 10 episodes on willpower is not the thing. I won't even get into that. It's a that state of flow that you don't have to use words like grind, and you don't have to approach things with drudgery and misery and thinking of images like going back down into the coal mine. That's not football. That's not love. That's not passion. There are, yes, let's be real, not everything is roses, not everything's dandy. A lot of football is menial task. One thing, before I watched one of my high school coaches having to dig out around the sprinkler system, and he was working like a ranch hand. I said, Coach, there's a lot of menial labor here in this coaching deal. And he said, you don't know the half of it, son. And there are things like that, don't get me wrong. But when it comes to the day-to-day task of coaching, preparing, game planning, and that is a flow. I remember as a high school coach, I gave the guys off Saturday. They watch games, spend time with the family. We would come in after church on Sunday and review and prepare for the next week. Now, this is 15 years ago. I know guys now are doing it Saturdays and Sundays, but we'd work a long time on Sunday, and I looked as forward to that as I did any day of the week, because we turned off the phones, shut the doors, nobody was around, nobody was coming in with a problem, and man, we were just happy, or at least I was, to prepare and work the process of figuring out your opponent and looking at that game plan and looking at yourself and seeing what you did right and what you did wrong and what you need to accomplish during the week. That wasn't a grind. That was something that I enjoyed. And, this thing of we're going to outwork them. We're going to outwork them. Now, as I talk to leaders here, as I talk to coaches here, this also refers to players. I'll get into that in just a second. But, as we're game planning, we're in the process, and we're we're working, the hours, it seems like, all right, we got in at 12:30 after church, or 1 o'clock after we ate lunch with the family, whatever. And we start going. All of a sudden you look up and it's 10 p.m. And where'd it go? That's that flow. And this thing of we're not leaving till X o'clock. We are going to outwork whoever we're going up against. That's also that's something that if I got to go on another rant, I don't mean to, and this is not negative, but make no mistake about it, there's few smart, successful football people that you or me or the other guy are really ever going to outwork. If you equate hours, if you equate time as work, well, you might put in more hours, but not many in today's football. If we're comparing a high school coach to a high school coach, a college coach to a college coach, an NFL coach to an NFL coach, etc. There's not many smart, successful people that you're actually going to outwork. And that equates to some rabbit you're going to pull out of your hat on game day to win the game because you, quote unquote, outworked them. We're going to grind until we outwork them. That's just not a real thing, because smart people, successful people, they plan their work, they work their plan, they're organized, they have a process, they have a system, and very rarely are they ever outworked. And they're not even thinking about it in those terms. They have a plan to get from A to Z, and they work that process. There is no drudgery in that. There is no, and I'm talking about equating with drudgery or grind. They get the job done. And some of the best of all time, and then they go home. Now, whether that took them 90 minutes or whether it took them 16 hours, they got it done. So when I think of ways that we communicate to our staff, and now just, on players, I've talked about this several times. In the year 2017, we have great players playing this game. Great kids, playing this game. And I believe these are some of the greatest kids of all time because of all the things, all the opportunities, good and bad, that can pull them away from playing this great game. Now, again, not everything is fun and games and goofing off and a day at the circus. There's a time to work and there's a time to play. There's always a time to get things done. But as you're communicating to a kid, making statements like, we're going to grind, we're going to outwork them, and equating it to a visit to your local coal mine, equating it to working for a living. This is a game. What do we do in a game? We play. and so when I make statements like that to kids, or I make statements like that to the assistants under me or the people that I lead, I want to be careful about creating and I tell you what, maybe I am so anti-grind, but again, I'm not going to call out any names. I'm not going to mention who, what, where on social media and all this stuff. Just I'm getting screamed at. Grind. Hashtag grind. Come on. I don't mean it as a negative. I'm not placing blame anywhere. But I just feel like we can do better than that, because if it's something you love, if it's something you enjoy, if you feel like you're making progress, that can be equated with just that feeling, man, that's indescribable, of accomplishment, of gaining success, of checking off the list. Those things are important. So it's the way that we use the words we use to go to work and get the job done that makes you feel, hey, we're in this together and we're getting it done, and we're doing the right things here. I listened to it, if you get a chance, I listen to the Jocko podcast a lot. It's one of the most popular podcasts in America. Jocko is an ex-leader in one of the SEAL teams. And he's just talking about the SEAL training and what they do. And he said, man, we enjoyed each other. We had a good time. We got our job done. He said, we went in on Saturday. Now, this is when they're stateside. And we'd go into wherever the SEALs are headquartered for their particular unit. I think there's one in Virginia and one in San Diego. The ones I know most about are in San Diego. But they had their base, their headquarters, and they had their SEAL team area. And he said we'd go in and we'd work on our equipment, we'd work on our ammo, we'd work on different drills on Saturday. We'd go back in on Sunday, and we'd work on this and work on that. They weren't punching a clock. They weren't being told to do this or do that. Why did they work 7 days a week? Why did they report 7 days a week and work on tasks that sometimes may have looked like, menial drudgery? They love what they're doing. They had a passion for what they're doing. When you have that, it's not that feeling of drudgery. Now, I always say, and I put this on several different things. If your why has got to exceed your what. In other words, it's not what you do, it's not what you're doing, it's not even the how. It's why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And get back to those things that brought you to this game. You came to play. You came to be a part of something. You came to accomplish things together and individually. And those are equated with positive feelings. I'm not even going to mention the word that I started on the rant about again because it just brings up those negatives. I want to look at the positive. So know what your why is. Communicate that why to the people that are under you, from your athletes to your coaches. And do what you do as your process. I hope that ended on a good note, and love to hear what your take is on it. As always, you can DM me on our Twitter site at process2win. That's at process2win. Well, from somewhere in the Lone Star State between Buda, Texas and Wimberley, Texas, I am going to sign off here from episode 18 of Coaching in the Car. And it's real apropos that I'm down here to say adios.